Well, it's shocking to me to see these riots done by Antifa and other collected leftist groups. The fact that they're wearing masks, concealing their identity, the fact that they're obviously organized and funded, those matching riot shields that all have the same corporate logo, no hate, which is absurdly comedic, but it also shows this is no grassroots movement. These are an army, a masked army, and their tactics are well rehearsed. They call it black bloc, which is a tactic. So they blend in to make it harder for them to be identified by authorities. This is shocking to me, but it's no longer surprising. And Berkeley police, as you saw, started out in full force, riot gear themselves. They're even arresting people merely for having kerchiefs over their faces. But then they made the decision, as you saw, as later confirmed by police themselves, they made the decision to retreat. Since when do riot police make this decision to retreat? Well, I have my own theories, but let's talk to someone who actually was a police officer with nothing less than the New York City Police Department, one of the finest police forces in the world. Let's go now via Skype to Florida to talk to our friend John Cardillo, a former police officer himself, who now has a talk radio program and the website, johncardillo.com. John, it's great to meet you. Thanks very much for joining our show today.
Oh, Ezra, thanks so much. I've always been a fan. It's great we finally get to do this.
Well, thank you. Now, you're a conservative commentator, but give us a little bit of background about your own service as a police officer, just so our viewers will understand a little bit of your experience and your expertise.
Well, yeah, I worked with the New York City Police Department, and I started in one of the most, what they actually called back in the 1980s, the most dangerous square mile in America. I came in the 1990s and went through disorder control training, which is a fancy way of saying riot training. And the New York City Police Department is known globally as the agency that literally wrote the book on disorder control. The disorder control guidelines of the NYPD are what are used by agencies around the world to set their own disorder control protocols. And I've been in disorder control situations, unfortunately, as a New York City police officer.
Okay, so that's your background. And you were with the best. I mean, the New York City Police Department is regarded not just the best at policing, but many other things. Anti-terrorism, I would say they're one of the leading anti-terrorism forces in the world. They have to be. Tell me, you've had the chance, as we all have, to look at what happened in Berkeley, not just this weekend, but frankly in other similar events. How would you characterize the police decision? They obviously were there in force. They knew this was coming. They had a lot of cops, riot gear, and then the decision that was later confirmed to retreat. That strikes me as unusual. How does it strike you as an ex-cop?
Well, disgraceful is what I would call it, because you have these departments, Berkeley, and then obviously in a situation like this, Ezra, they get help from surrounding departments. And those surrounding departments might be San Jose, might be San Francisco, might be San Francisco County, Marin County. And I mention them in particular because these are pretty wealthy areas. San Jose is arguably one of the wealthiest areas in the world because of Silicon Valley, meaning that these departments have top-notch equipment and top-notch training. But what they also have, unfortunately, are appointed chiefs that are beholden to liberal politicians. And if you look at the common thread in all of these retreat scenarios, and we'll get into why that should never happen. In the NYPD, you are taught from day one in the academy, we can never lose. We can never back down, because when we do, the people that are relying on us to protect them become the victims. And so the police should never retreat, especially in an area like Northern California, where there are large departments to supplement one another. They had more than enough bodies. The common denominator, that common problem, are the liberal politicians giving orders to their appointed chiefs.
One of the signs held up at an earlier Antifa rally is, "We will become ungovernable." That's the threat, and it certainly looks chaotic. And the whole idea is to, in my mind, politically, is to create a narrative that things are falling apart under Trump, the country is ripping itself apart, Trump is illegitimate. The two sides here are, quote, anti-racist, no hate activists and neo-Nazis on the other side. But what I saw, at least in the on-the-ground videos, even if it didn't make it to the larger broadcasters, was left-wing street teams of the far-left activists, whether it's George Soros or other funders behind them, clearly running rampant, and officials who could stop it saying, nah, it suits our interests to have this riot run rampant.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Absolutely. I mean, look, what you have here, I've been doing some periscopes and I've been putting content out on my site and on my radio show saying that we are in Civil War 2.0. It's for the most part ideological, but there are these skirmishes. Like I was saying, the Battle of Boston, the Battle of Charlottesville, and now we're seeing the Battle of Berkeley. And I've been running this theme on my show. And when I did the first one about the Battle of Charlottesville, or Battle of Charlottesville, not Boston, that came later, I was vilified. Some people in the intelligence and military community who are very conservative said, oh, come on, that's hyperbole, that's rhetoric, you shouldn't go that far. Well, they're not saying it anymore. I'm getting emails and direct messages saying, damn, you were right. And most disturbingly, even yesterday on Twitter, a San Francisco Chronicle reporter referred to Antifa as an army. She said it looked like the police and Antifa were two armies, one of blue, one of black. And she was right. That's exactly what Antifa is.
Yeah.
It is a radical socialist Alinskyite army using violent terror tactics to push an anachronistic leftist agenda. This is scary stuff. People need to wake up.
Yeah, and we saw how the police cars themselves fled, how journalists were attacked, any bystanders were attacked. Right now we're looking on the screen of shields and sticks. The shields say no hate, and they're being used to smash people. It's so absurd. Even the San Francisco Chronicle, which is a left-wing newspaper, couldn't help being honest. They called it violent. They called it anarchist. I think even the San Francisco newspapers were shocked by this. I want to get back to your history of policing. I can imagine there might be some situation, a gangland shooting, where if you had one or two police officers who were, let's say, clearly outgunned by 10 or 15 gang members who had or automatic weapons, I could understand one or two police officers who were in hopeless odds temporarily, tactically retreating till reinforcements arrive. But that wasn't this. This was a prepared riot squad. And for them to decide to retreat, like just speaking technically, put aside the politics, those police officers could have won this physical conflict if they chose to. They could have announced this as an unlawful riot, read the Riot Act as we used to say. They could have proceeded, they could have used non-lethal weapons, tear gas, maybe, rubber bullets or whatever. Like, they weren't actually destined to lose until they were ordered to retreat. Am I correct to say that fully prepared, fully trained, fully equipped, the police could have actually held their ground?
Oh, you're 100, Ezra, you are 100% right. And you used an analogy that I often use, right? That's a great analogy. Two patrol officers roll into a gang saturated area. They come across 50 gang members, all that they think are armed. Sure, they pull back a few blocks until reinforcements arrive. That's just common sense and sound policing. But this was exactly what you said. This was a police department, a very well-trained, very well-equipped police department in the San Francisco metropolitan area, equipped and trained to handle these rioters. Every police officer, in addition to every weapon they have, has a radio. They could pick that radio up and call for help from San Francisco PD, the county PD, California Highway Patrol, federal agencies. There was no way they were going to lose this. And I'll even argue one other point. Forget non-lethal devices. When the Antifa rioters brandished sticks, those are deadly weapons, dangerous instruments. Those police officers would have been justified deploying their firearms and using deadly force. This retreat is exactly what you speculated to be. An order given, not a decision made, let's call it what it is, an order given by liberal politicians to lay off, to go easy on their liberal army, their left-wing army of Antifa terrorists. That's all this is about. The bad guys are doing the bidding of those liberal politicians in Northern California, and the police were told to stand down and let the leftist terrorists beat on innocent people. Because at this rally, even Ezra, the Washington Post put out a tweet today that said a leftist Antifa, they didn't call, they did say Antifa, were beating peaceful right-wing protesters. The Washington Post said peaceful right-wing protesters. If they went that far, how savage were these beatings? Yeah. But you're spot on. They were ordered to stand down by liberal politicians.
It's got to be demoralizing for honest cops who just want to, enforce the law, peace, as we say in Canada, peace, order, and good government. They're not political people. They joined the police academy to fight bad guys and protect good guys, and to be ordered to retreat is not only probably professionally humiliating, but to not be able to do your job. I got two technical questions for you.
Sure.
What's the law in various parts of the U.S. about wearing masks in public, especially in violence? I've seen some video, it was in another state, I think it might have been in Alabama, where police ordered Antifa to remove their handkerchiefs from their faces or be arrested. Do you know what the state of the law is? Is it different county by county, state by state? I find it terrifying to have, and that's the point of hundreds of armed people with masks. Is that in itself against the law?
It is in certain jurisdictions. So typically in the United States, that would be a state law first, and then counties could pass ordinances. Some states have what we call preemption statutes that say a county can't deem something illegal, the state doesn't. But in this case, it would be state law. From what I understand, and I've got to reread the California statute, it was an arrestable offense in Berkeley because the first 3 arrests of Antifa members were made because they refused to comply with what were called the lawful orders to remove their masks. So as I understand it, it is illegal in California, but it would most likely be a state-by-state or a law, a statute.
Well, and that's the thing. If the second you take them to take their mask off, they lose the courage of anonymity. And they can be identified, they can be charged, they can be subject to public pressure to renounce violence or whatnot. We've even seen professors identified before at riots. So that's very interesting. And the police started to do that, as you mentioned, but quickly stopped. My last question for you is this. You know, going back centuries, there's been a philosophical debate about how do we get along with each other. And I think it was, I don't want to get too deep in the philosophy, but the idea of the Leviathan, this all-powerful state that we all give up the right to violence to the state. We say, I'm not going to stab my neighbor. I'm not going to have an endless violent feud. I agree, as some sort of social contract, that we all give the monopoly on violence to the police, subject to very strict rules. That way, I don't have to have my own gang. I don't have to have my own private army, because we can all rely on our independent courts and our professional police to keep us safe. And that works when it works. But the moment the police or the judges or the prosecutors say, you know what, we're not going to enforce the law, we're not going to uphold the rule of law, we're going to give a pass to these people because of politics, that's not just a problem in that instance. That telegraphs to every person in the country, you're on your own. So maybe you ought to get a mask and a shield and a stick, and maybe you ought to return to vigilantism, because the law will not protect you. To me, that's far more terrifying. I don't want the tit for tat. I don't want conservatives to say, well, I've got a lawful firearm. I'm going to now bring my gun to the next protest in the town square because I can't rely on Berkeley police. I don't want Civil War 2.0. What's the future here, John? Last word to you.
Well, you know, Ezra, that's a great point. But unfortunately, it's not just ideological. It's not just a social compact. The Supreme Court of the United States of America in Warren v. District of Columbia they ruled that the police have no legal duty to protect you. That's why I'm such a fierce Second Amendment advocate. I encourage your listeners to research Warren v. DC. The police do not have to respond to your 911 call. The police do not have to intervene in a riot situation where you are being beaten to death. They have no legal duty to protect you. I encourage every American to carry a firearm wherever legal, to train themselves on the use of that firearm, because what you're seeing in Berkeley, as reprehensible, as disgusting as it is for these liberal politicians to order police to stand down, it is not illegal. The Supreme Court said they can do it. That's what's terrifying, and that's something every American should know, and far too few do.
Well, this is news to me as well. I mean, of course, we're Canadians up here. We have a lot of American viewers. I will study that law. I find that terrifying. I believe that we all had a social agreement amongst each other, even if it was unwritten. And that's one of the reasons why police officers are held in high regard in the general community, because they are the good guys. They are the good Samaritans, the ones who will intervene. And if this is the new, and God forbid this is the new face of policing, and I know it's not in New York, and I hope it's not in Canada. John, I really appreciate your point of view. It's great to have you on the show. Nice to meet you, and I really appreciate you standing up for those traditional policing values, which are one of the reasons why police are held in such high regard in public. I hope that continues, and this Berkeley style of policing does not.
Yeah, Ezra, thanks so much for inviting me on. If guys like us aren't going to get out there and get loud about this, nobody's going to do it. We took the responsibility on, right? So we have to follow through.
Yeah, right on. There you have it, John Cardillo. You can check out all his stuff at johncardillo.com, radio show. He does Periscope videos, and of course, he's a big shot on Twitter, tweeting truth to power. I love it. I follow him on Twitter. I encourage you to do so. John, thanks. It's great to have the common sense of the NYPD retired officer on our channel. Nice to see you. Hey, if you like that, sign up for my show every day. Click on the screen to subscribe.